Welcome back to Big Mouth. I'm getting obsessed with Smallville again. Yeah, and it feels great. It's been a happy accident. Listen, on its original run, Smallville was my absolute obsession. This show, as pathetic as it sounds, was my whole life. So welcome to the latest edition of Smallville, the saviour of Superman. One of the many things that Smallville got right was its characters. You actually cared about their characters, and there was such development with Clark, Martha, Jonathan, Lex, Lionel, Lana, Chloe, Lois. You really loved those characters. And when you compare it to the character work that's done on Arrowverse, it's not as good. But the characters on Smallville were so special. What was so unique about Smallville was that it was a pre-Superman story, but young Clark Kent still had superpowers, and he still was a hero. So he may not have wore the costume, and there was always this kind of debate: why doesn't he wear the costume? Because it's a pre-Superman story. All I wanted was to see a little bit of Superman in the finale. I think if you're a fan of the first 7 seasons, the 7 seasons that Our Miles run show, it was a lot harder to embrace the final 3 seasons. I mean, what you got to remember is, from a fan standpoint, you had Our Miles leaving, you had John Glover, Michael Rosenbaum, and Kristen Krug all leaving. So not only were you losing these showrunners, you were losing a major element of this show. So it was hard for me to embrace the final 3 seasons, but I will say those final 3 seasons did have some amazing episodes. You had Absolute Justice, you had Bride, you had Abyss. Abyss was a beautiful episode. Whatever people are saying about Alison Mack, the work she did with the character of Chloe was absolutely fantastic. And that episode Abyss was so emotional and so devastating to see Chloe losing her memories. So many other really, really good episodes like Checkmate, and it goes on. So even though it was really hard for me to come to terms with having Smallville without Lex, I mean, for me, Michael Rosenbaum was a young Robert De Niro. And by the end of Smallville, I was saying that Michael would win an Oscar sometime soon. And Michael's career has been a very interesting one because I think he's a very interesting guy. He now does these podcasts. I expected him to have a very, very successful film career, and for one reason or another. One of the reasons is that Michael is obsessed with comedy. He wants to be the funny man. And I think after doing Smallville for 7 years and doing this really serious character, and I mean Lex's story was so dark, so compelling, and the layers of that character were so wonderful. He is the best live action Lex, and for me that absolutely says everything. What a success. I mean, John Glover, who played Lionel Luthor, has recently come onto Twitter, and I think that's really what sparked me going onto YouTube and watching these clips. And I think I'm going to rewatch the whole show because Smallville was so beautiful, so unique. It had so many different elements. I mean, you had the shippers arguing with each other. You had Clois and you had Klarna. I actually loved both relationships. What I loved, that you start off with this kind of relationship with Clark and Lana, and by season 7 you get this foreshadowing for Clark and Lois. So when Clark's watching the goodbye video in the season 7 finale Arctic, when when Lana's saying goodbye to him, and then you get Lois walking in and embracing him, that's foreshadowing for the next 3 seasons. It was so cleverly done. So with this for the first time in live action, you actually get to see both relationships develop. And it was a beautiful thing. Now, I'm not really a romance guy. What I really enjoyed about Smallville was Clark's relationship with his parents, his dynamic with Lex, and the stuff with Lionel and Lex was so powerful and so beautiful. When you get an episode like Memoria, I mean, you can't even imagine any show on Arrowverse ever doing something as powerful as Memoria. This is my problem with Arrowverse. it's not on a journey, the characters. They're not really... it's just there. Now, I understand that Arrowverse they're in this superhero universe already. But I think in the first 2 seasons of Arrow and The Flash, it was really competing with Smallville to be like... They was competing with Smallville to be even better than Smallville was. And I never thought I'd ever hear myself say that. But then they became really, really dumbed down. And now I look to Smallville again as the ultimate superhero show. And I've said this before. You can throw Daredevil at me, but Daredevil hasn't been consistent. Daredevil was good in its first season. This season I'm in the middle of. It's quite good. But it had a really poor season 2. Smallville was consistent. You had the first season with the Meteor Freaks. A lot of people didn't like the Freak of the Week. I enjoyed it because not only did it make Kryptonite a fantastic element of the Superman story, a character in the show, it gave Clark superpowered people to fight. And they had great little stories. You saw that they were messed up. And like the Kryptonite made their situations worse. And I absolutely loved that. Then in season 2, it's Clark's search for his heritage. You discover the Kawatche Caves. And that's brilliant because the Kawatche Caves, let me get my words out, are a kind of foreshadowing of the Fortress of Solitude. And Alan Miles didn't have the budget to do the Fortress back then. So they came out because they're such geniuses with the Kawatche Caves. And that was brilliant. And you saw Lex and Lionel's obsession. Lionel's using the caves because he's trying to save his life. And Lex is trying to get to the bottom of it. And he knows Clark's got something to do with it. So that was brilliant. And then they cast Terrence Stamp as the voice of Jor-El. Terrence Stamp, General Zod himself. And he's got such a recognisable voice. That was genius. And all the stuff with Jor-El and Clark was brilliant because you don't get the Jor-El from Man of Steel. You don't get the Jor-El from Superman the movie. You get a Jor-El that's testing Clark in a different way. He's literally he's giving him tough love. So you've got Jonathan, who's got these kind of brilliant kind of speeches and lessons. One of the things I loved I remember one of the things he says to him, quitting is an easy habit to have. And I love the kind of stuff he came up with. John Schneider was a great Jonathan Kent. And that father-son relationship was awesome. Then you get the fabulous Annette O'Toole, who played Lana Lang in Superman 3. She was a brilliant Martha. Now, she wasn't very happy when she talks now because she wasn't given as much to do as John Schneider. But I think that's obvious because you've got the father-son. Smallville was really about fathers and sons, especially the early seasons. Lex and Lionel, Clark and Jonathan, Clark and Jor-El. And again, Smallville wasn't just one thing. It had so many elements to it. Then you look at Chloe, you look at Lana, and the journeys that those characters went in. Now, what really helped Smallville to be this storytelling marvel was it wasn't trapped by being woke. Because back then, things were different, even in the early noughties. So even though they weren't pushing this thing, they still had really, really strong female characters. Lois, Lana, Chloe, Tess, these were all strong female characters in their own rights who went on a journey. Tess started off really trusting Lex, and then she realises that she's actually a loofah, and she goes on this character journey of discovery. Lana starts off as this really young lady who's basically a cheerleader, but decides to quit cheerleading because the players are cheating with their grades and stuff. And then she opens up the Talon because it reminds her of her parents. And that's her thing. And she does the blood drives and all that. You know, I want to find my way in the world. Even as a 28-year-old guy, I understood that from a point of view of a teenage girl. Then you've got Chloe, who wants to go to school, loves going to school because she loves working for the school newspaper with Clark. Chloe's in love with Clark, but that doesn't stop her being strong in her own right. Again, Alison did such a fabulous job. And really, what's happened with Alison is just heartbreaking. And I don't know what's true and what's not. But I'll tell you something. I don't want to get light up a torch and all that stuff and start talking negatively about Alison because I don't know the facts. And what Alison gave me with Chloe was so amazing, so beautiful. But this sums up this show. the story development, the character development. You will never get a superhero show like it again. Tell me what superhero show developed their characters so well. I mean, let's talk about Descent. Let's talk about Lex and Lionel in that final scene when he talks about King Arthur and when he finally kills Lionel. And Lionel's proud of him as he's falling to his death because that's what Lionel wanted for him. Now, he didn't want him to control Clark because in the end, Lionel was protecting Clark. Now, what Lionel's motivations for that are, we never knew if he genuinely cared for Clark. I suppose he did. And then the brilliant scene when Clark goes in Luthor and finds the message in the Kryptonian symbol from Lionel. You know, I've known kings, I've known these people, I've known presidents, and I thought I was better than them all, apart from when I met you, Kal-El. It's been my proud honour, however he said it, to serve you. I cry when that scene happens. You know, Smallville was so special to me. And I'll say what I said at the top of the show. It was an amazing show. I was obsessed with it for a reason. Because I started off as a Superman fan coming into this show, thinking it wasn't going to be very interesting. But it became the Bible of Superman for me. It was brilliant. Our Miles changed some things from Superman lore, but the stuff they changed was awesome. Having Lex be friends with Clark and going through this kind of thing where ultimately they become enemies was brilliant. I'd even dare to say that Lex's arc was better than Clark's, and Clark's arc was beautiful as well. But Lex's arc was so thought through, and Michael Rosenbaum's performance as Lex, I will never forget him my whole life. He gave me something. As a man at that time who was struggling who I was going to be and what direction I would go in and being really lonely and confused, Lex on Smallville and the way Rosenbaum and Alan Miles developed that character meant a lot to me personally. I'm never going to forget that show. And I always said the character dynamics were as awesome and as epic and as watchable as the superhero action. And I love the fact that Smallville wanted to earn the right before it introduced other characters from DC lore, and they did. You know, Green Arrow, Aquaman. You know, it's up to you if you think they're good versions of the characters, but they brought them in. They had Impulse, aka the Flash, but they couldn't call him the Flash for licensing reasons or whatever the reasons were. But we even had their version of the Flash, and it was a pretty awesome version as well. So, absolutely, when you think of what they did, we even had Connor Kent. We actually had Connor Kent in the final season as well. And I remember when I read it, and I'm thinking, bloody hell, everything that they've done, everything they've been able to give us from the Superman lore, from DC lore, has been amazing. This show, I believe Arrowverse will be easily forgettable in 20, 30 years' time. But you're never going to forget Smallville. You're never going to forget the excitement and the emotions of watching Smallville. It's a special show. I was so obsessed when it finished, and I must admit, I was disappointed with the series finale. I think, really, for me, what saved it was Rosenbaum coming back, and I'll always be grateful to him because I don't think he particularly wanted to. I think once he finished, that was it for Michael, and I think he didn't particularly want to come back, but he did it. He did it. He didn't want to disappoint the fans, and I think for his future career, he knew he couldn't piss off his fans, and I'm just glad he came back. But the body of work that Smallville is something to be really, really proud of when you think of everything that they did and they achieved. This was a tireless show that, for me, this show, one of the things with long-running shows, they seem to get tired by the end. Smallville never seemed tired to me. When we got to the 10th season, you kind of knew it was rolling up. But I think there were elements of the 10th season that were pretty awesome as well. I always said they shouldn't have done Darkseid, and the reason they shouldn't have done Darkseid is because they didn't have the budget. And having Darkseid Lionel, for me, didn't work. It was so cheap and so short. But I did like Clark seeing his best bits and being motivated to defeat Darkseid in the end. But, you know, Darkseid's something you do if you've got the budget. And they didn't have the budget. But again, with that elements of that where kind of you needed superhero vigilante registration and things like that, they were really good pieces of work. It's just something that's in my heart forever. Smallville's something I will never forget and always treasure. Thanks very much. Please like the video, dislike the video if you like, share the channel, share the video. If you know Smallville fans, please tell them to watch the videos because we're all on the same side. I want to talk with Smallville fans again because I tell you what, I'm rewatching this series because, to be honest with you, the way TV's going, I'm starting to get bored. And this show never bored me. No matter how many times I've rewatched it, this show always has some elements that interest you. I can watch Smallville and I can cry. The emotional bits were really emotional. It hit the spot in a character-driven way. And you can't tell me Arrowverse does the same. Thank you very much. Keep it DC.